I would like to officially welcome you to Visualizing Your World, connecting events, complex issues to drive informed action. My name is Shelley Hayduck, and I am pleased to co-host this event with Matt Caton, our Director of Customer Solutions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
And we also have Jay Ofemi, who some of you have probably seen on other webinars, our support analyst and engineer, who is going to be giving us his view and perspective on Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, happy to be here, guys, and thank you for joining us today. And we got some pretty exciting stuff to cover, so we're pretty excited to get into it.
All right, great. So just in terms of context, we live in an ever-increasing, complicated world. So in addition to sort of navigating the new normal with the global pandemic, which we are going to be covering, our COVID-19 brain by popular demand, there are social issues, current events, things that impact your personal life and your business are sort of descending our way. So what better place to kind of bring it all together and make sense of it all but in your brain. So we're going to start out with Jay presenting Black Lives Matter. And the brain can be used in a couple of ways. You can use it as your tool to organize, to formulate an opinion on something, to dive deep into research. I like to throw things in there that like keep me up at night or if I'm planning. So when the pandemic broke yet in January, you know, I was mapping things out. And it can also be an educational tool as well. So if you have a perspective and want to share it with your classroom as an educator, your colleagues as a business person, or just your community, it is that platform for also communicating these ideas and bring it together in a way that makes sense. So there'll be some different perspectives on this call today. This is Jay's perspective, and you know the reason we're going to be showing you these different perspectives is so that you can reflect on and create your perspective. So there may be stuff in this brain, you may not do it this way, or you might put different things in or work on something else, and that's fine. But our hope today is to just inspire you with some really cool examples that you can use to really better yourself and your community. So I guess with that, I'm going to make sure, Jay, you've got the ball and go ahead and show your desktop.
Yep, I think I'm already presenting my desktop here.
All right, yeah, I can see all these lovely icons of your various brains. Looks good. And now on that note, I'm muting myself.
All right, so great. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. You know, we have some pretty interesting stuff to get into here. And you know, since all the things that are happening around us right now in the world, it just makes sense to sort of use this platform to put together information for those who are kind of looking for that information, you know. And as you can see here, I have, yeah, so as Shelley mentioned, I like to keep my icons pretty interesting here. It keeps things colorful and nice. And actually, hang on for me 1 second here, just so I'm just going to dive right into the Black Lives Matter brain here. And this is actually a passion project that I began working on. And, you know, I received a lot of calls from colleagues and friends that kind of just wanted to know how I felt about this whole situation, but also wanted to know how they can help and things like that. So, you know, it actually prompted me to put together what I already had as far as information that I was looking into as far as how I can help myself and kind of just build this brain up. So I actually had a discussion with Shelley, who was very interested in presenting this brain, and I'm glad that, you know, I was given the opportunity to actually present this brain to you. And you know, for anyone who does want to kind of go through this, it's really very informational, and we will provide you guys with a way to get this brain so that you can explore it on your own. But during this this webinar here, I'm just going to go through a few main topics in this brain here to just kind of show you what the brain is all about, and you know, hopefully, you know, to kind of also just show people that it's easy to actually make a change, you know, to make a difference in this community, in the society with what's going on. You don't have to necessarily have all the resources in the world. You can still kind of make things happen. So here, when I was putting this together, I pretty much thought that it would it would make sense for the main two topics here to be how to understand and how to help, because for a lot of the people that I have spoken with during these times, those have been the two main questions that they've had. For some people so for non-African Americans, they've had the, how to better understand question, and also how to help question. For some of my African American friends, they already know what's going on and they kind of understand, but they're not, so sure how to help. So this is just something that I hope, it helps you guys if you're looking for this kind of information, but it's just a passion project for me as well to put this information together so I know, where I can find these things and how I can help and how I can better understand. So if you're coming in here and you kind of just want to understand what's going on, the first thing I would recommend doing is checking out some TV shows and movies or books and articles. If you're a podcast listener, you can, we have some podcasts in here as well. I myself prefer TV shows and movies, so that's usually what I would go for first. And there are lots of movies. I mean, there are lots of shows and movies that kind of depict the African American history and sort of the struggle around being an African American, or I should say being an African American in the United States, right? But these are some of the movies that I thought and TV shows that I thought were really impactful. And if you were to, for example, watch all of these, you will get a pretty solid understanding of sort of the African American history and where, all of this is coming from. And you will get a better understanding of how it feels like now to be an African American in the United States. And so if you're not into TV shows and movies, though, we have some podcasts and books and articles, like I mentioned. You can see here in this brain that, so I will be mentioning some of the features of the brain as well as I kind of go through this. And the first thing that I'm going to mention, you can see here that I actually color coded most of the things in my brain. It helps me to quickly, as I'm kind of exploring the brain, it helps me to quickly figure out, all right, what's what, right? So here, besides using types and things like that, so you can use thought types to specify a color of a thought. So here, all these green thoughts here are books, and they all simply just have the thought type book, and that's why they're colored like that. But if I'm looking at this, it helps me quickly differentiate what are books, what are articles, and then right here you have further reading, which just kind of tells me that there's more down here. So each one of these other thoughts are just pretty much standalone thoughts, and then this one has more context in it. So I mean more content in it. So here there's a lot of books and articles to explore as far as even some of these mention 10 books about race to read instead of asking a person of color to explain things to you. So, if you're really looking to learn about this and you're very studious and you like to read and things like that, you can find a lot of information here as far as what books to read, what articles to check out and things like that. So once you've gotten a basic understanding of what's going on, and you want to move on to helping and seeing how you can help with the current situation, I believe, so it's actually interesting because a lot of my friends, one of the main complaints or one of the main things that I would hear is that, they don't have the resources to help, or, they can't really donate to an organization or things like that. And that is understandable. Not everybody is in that position to go out and protest or to go out and donate. But as far as things to do to help, one of my favorite parts of this entire brain actually is the petitions area here. Everyone who has a computer today, which is pretty much like everybody, can sign these petitions. And I myself have gone through and signed all these petitions, as many as I could. But there are quite a few here for people who aren't really sure what they can do to help. Some of these petitions are just petitions to help the family of people who are victimized by police brutality or by just racial injustice in general. So even if you're just pretty much contributing to a family that was affected by this, things like that do help. And for anything that has been a policy or a law that's been overturned in the past, it's usually when a group of people, enough people come together and pretty much make it so that law is overturned or so that policy is changed. And the best way to do it in a digital age, especially when we're all in lockdown, is by signing petitions and kind of just putting your name out there and saying, I support this. And honestly, that goes a long way for people who might not have the resources that to donate and things like that. And as you can see here, there are a lot of these. There are a lot of petitions. I was actually quite surprised to see how many petitions there are. Like, and a lot of them actually, and a lot of them have gotten a lot of support. A lot of people sign them. And using the brain here, you can actually see that you can use our internal browser to just sign these petitions if you want. So you don't necessarily need to leave the brain to actually do this. This is pretty much, you click sign petition and then you enter your email, I believe, and that's it. So it's pretty much 2 seconds, and this is a very impactful thing that anybody can do. So I think that, of all things in this brain, if there is a section that I would pick to be my favorite, it would definitely be this one, because it's something that anybody can do, but can be yet so impactful. And this thought here, actually, it pretty much just lists out all the petitions you can sign, and you can even click here to click more petitions, and you can see a lot more of those. So there's no shortage on petitions to sign. If you guys feel like you want to help, but you're not so sure on how to do that, or maybe you don't have the resources, maybe maybe you don't want to go out and protest because you're not you don't feel safe, to do that, because a lot of tragic things have happened during a lot of protests. And while protesting does bring awareness to a situation like this, you sitting at home and signing these petitions also goes a long way to help a cause such as this one. So besides the petitions as well, another way you can help is donations. Before we get into that, though, just a few notable mentions here are color of change, which so whenever I hover over a thought here, you can see that a little hint sort of comes up and shows you pretty much more detail about that thought. So the way that's happening is because those hints are essentially just a thought label, which are the things that we have down here. For most of these websites, whenever I attach them into the brain, when I drag and drop them into the brain will actually automatically like differentiate between, all right, this should be the title and this should be the label. In some cases, if you wanted to say something specific, you can go in there and change it as well. But here, so the Color of Change organization, they pretty much just help to do real things, like something real about racial injustice. So you can always join that organization if that's something you're interested in, or donate directly to them. And so let's go back to the donations here real quick. And there are a lot of different organizations that you could donate to as well. There are different categories of organizations that you can donate to as well. So I'm just going to read this off real quick for you guys. Majority of these are policy reform organizations, and then others include victim memorial funds, police reform organizations, community enrichment organizations, youth-oriented community organizations, incarceration reform organizations, bail funds, political organizations, and mega funds. And mega funds are essentially just you donate into a category of organizations, right? And then they split up your donations to help those specific organizations. So another really cool feature in the brain is that you can hyperlink from text that's in a note to another thought. So mega funds are down here, and we can always click on that. But if we're already reading over here, we can click here as well to just kind of quickly go to the mega funds thought. And you can see here that that's pretty much what I just said. So the single donations that you make will be split between multiple organizations. So for those who don't, you have the resources, oh, excuse me, you have the resources, but you don't have the time. So mega funds are definitely a great way to kind of put your resources out there to help a bunch of different organizations without having to put in the time to do the research or to kind of split things up yourself. So, and another one I wanted to touch on real quick was also the victim memorial funds, which these any donations that you make here will go towards the family of those victims, like I mentioned. So, a lot of these people, they don't have a lot of resources on hand, and they can't necessarily provide to accommodate for the funeral, or to accommodate for the loss of that person and the family. So any donation that they can receive from the public is actually a huge help. And that's definitely a way to help the cause as well. So donating to these victim memorial funds may not seem like you're doing something to change what's happening in the future, but supporting people who were impacted by something that you're trying to change, I believe is something that's really impactful. And I mean, not to mention the fact that it's very just, you're being extremely selfless by showing love to this family that was affected by something that was very tragic, and that itself, goes a long way. So real quick here, there are a few things that I just wanted to touch on. And you know what, actually, I didn't include a third category here, but if I was to include another category, it would be why to help, right? Because, so if we go back in here into how to understand, I actually have a thought here that says significant historical events. And this is essentially a timeline of the African American history. Now, there's a lot of things that's missing from here. Pretty much what I did was just compile as much of the main events that I could find, and just the notable ones out of those main events are the ones that I put here. So this is definitely by far not the full list of every single thing that happened in African American history, but these are some key points. And to sort of make the point of why to help, and also to just sort of put things in perspective for those who kind of want to understand like where all this is coming from. Like we all kind of know where all this is coming from, but when you look at something like this, I was actually putting this together. I was gonna just show the African American history in general. I was not gonna focus on any kind of negative news. I was not gonna focus on negative African American history. But as you'll see in a second, it actually turns out, so we start here at 1619, which Dutch ship brings 20 African indentured servants to the English colony of Jamestown, Virginia. I'm not sure if that's the very first time that slaves were brought into the United States, but it seems like a pretty, a good place to start there at 1619. I'm sure there might be, earlier records. And then if you go through this, we got the Stonewall Rebellion at 1739. Also, I'm not sure if that's the first rebellion, but it definitely an impactful one. And then you kind of just go through this, and there you can see a lot of these like events that most of you probably have recognized at this point. Most of you probably have heard before, and it is quite interesting, right? You have the Civil Rights Act, you have the 14th and 15th Amendment, you have Plessy versus Ferguson, and then you have Brown versus Board of Education, and all of these things happen. And then Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech in 1963. You have Bloody Sunday in 1965, which was an event where the KKK, I believe, planted dynamite underneath a church in Selma, and tragically four people lost their lives in that bombing. And you have Malcolm X's assassination. And then here in 1967, you have the first Black person appointed to the United States Supreme Court, which was Thurgood Marshall. And so kind of like I mentioned before, I did not try to focus on any kind of negativity in this. I just wanted to show the history. But it just turns out that since 1619 all the way to 1967 here, there's not really anything good. There's not really mention of, excellence in African American history. So, I mean, like I said, I did kind of skim through a lot of the main events here. So there's a lot of things that I'm sure I skipped over that were good things that happened. But just to kind of, give you the perspective, right? So now we have, a lot of things have changed since then. We have the first African American astronaut in space. We have the Million Man March. We have the first African American U.S. Secretary of State, and then also the first African American female billionaire, which was Oprah Winfrey, and then Barack Obama being elected as the 44th U.S. president. And you can kind of see here that there is progress being made. There is some sort of progress being made in sort of coming back to the light from the darkness, right? But you know that I think more of what we're seeing now is just kind of like, if you look as far as this goes, you know, the progress that's being made is very small, and it's still very new. And when you see things that, like some of the things that's happening now, it's almost kind of like, you know, we're going backwards. It's almost kind of like, you know, all this outrage is coming from essentially African Americans who look at this and they think that we're going backwards when you start to see certain things that are unfolding, certain events that are unfolding right now. So this is actually a cool way to do a timeline in the brain, and it shows you, it kind of shows, you know, the whole thing from left to right, up to down. And since I use the dates of the events as the, like, sort of the beginning of the thought's name, the brain actually ordered them automatically. Or, you know, I'm sorting by numerical order here, so you know, you can actually see them in numerical order, which makes for a good timeline. But that's not the only way that you can do a timeline here. We actually have the Black Lives Matter timeline. And for this timeline that you saw here, it wasn't too big. So you can imagine if I added a lot more records to this, it would start to scroll. And once I start to scroll through this, you might start to get lost as to, like, all right, which thought am I looking for at any given time? So another way to do a timeline here, you can just pretty much use either the children direction, so children thoughts are below, or the jump direction to the side here. So you could just have jump thoughts keep going and going and going. But here we use children thoughts, and we used directional links to kind of, you know, drive the point home. So you want to keep going down. So in 2013, the Black Lives Matter movement began, following outrage of several, you know, murders in the African American community. And in so we kind of just going down here in 2014, you can see that I'm not really adding any more data so before, all of my thoughts would just have, you know, it would be a thought, and then the data would be children thoughts. But now that we're doing a timeline, all that data are just pretty much jump thoughts. And some people might prefer it like this. Some people might prefer it, kind of like I said, to have the timeline be the one that's going to the left, and then have your data still be children thought, depending on how you kind of want to visualize this. So you can keep going 2015, 2016. And, you know, as far as getting back to a date that you can no longer see in this context, if you're kind of stepping through like I did, you'll be able to do that using the past thoughts list here, sort of like the history of the brain. Or well, you can always search for it as well, which is just a, you know, quick, surefire way to find whatever you're looking for. Or you can just pin any significant thoughts that you think that you're going to be clicking on a lot in this timeline. You can just right click and you can pin them such that they are now, you know, at the top of your brain, and they can and you can reach them. So I think I might not be able to see it here because mine is a little bit, I don't think I have enough space to view that just yet. So at the risk of completely collapsing my notes here, so you can see 2014 is right there. But so I do want to keep this a little bit open here, because some of those notes are important. And that's sort of what I wanted to do with this brain as well, because some of the notes are pretty much just a summary of the event of what the thought is saying. So sometimes it's just a link to a website that you can check out. Sometimes it's just a quick summary so you can have an idea of that event. And so here I do want to touch on just one more main topic here. And another, so as far as color coding this brain goes, you can see that I can quickly find my topics, not only because I have them as a type, so I can always click on this type to see all of my topics at once. But I can also just quickly find them because I just know all the topics are the same color. So color coding your brain is really just a great way to help you, you know, especially if you're exploring it to show people, or if you're just quickly trying to navigate through it. Color coding it is a really great way to quickly know what you want to click on next. So here we have inspirational African American leaders, and I mean, there are just so many of them, but I felt like these guys here that I've put into this under this thought are some good notable mentions. And so actually what we did here, we attached the undefeated 44 that to the main thought here. So if you're exploring this brain and you're like, wait, hang on, there should be way more people in here, you can actually go through this website here and you'll see that they have quite a few people that are mentioned in here who have done some incredible things in the past to help pretty much drive racial injustice out of America as much as they can, right? And they've made a huge impact so far. And if you know, kind of like why I said this would be the category of why to help, right? If you're looking for, I don't know if anyone's looking for why they should help. If it's not clear, you know, you can look at these people's their lives and just kind of derive inspiration from that. Because actually, when I was putting this together, I already knew about a lot of these people, but just kind of rereading some of the things that they did, it was just so inspirational. It was just, you know, so amazing. So here, you know, another cool little feature here that that I used, and I do realize that I'm going over some pretty advanced features of the brain right now. If some of these things are kind of, you know, going too, if I'm moving too fast for some of you guys and this is kind of confusing you a little bit, we do have our The Brain 101 classes on Fridays, so be sure to register for that, because there we go over just the basics of the brain. So I'm going over a little bit of some advanced features here. So here I wanted to kind of make sure that everyone that was listed here was in a specific order. And I didn't want to do it like alphabetically or by any other, I pretty much wanted to manually specify what order they should be in. So I used the hidden ordering prefix. And that here is when you add a period and a digit to the front of the thought name. So you pretty much, when you're creating your thought, or even after you've created your thought, you can edit your thought and add a digit, I mean, add a period and a digit. It could be single, double, triple digits, depending on how many thoughts you think you're gonna have. And that will help you sort the thoughts manually. So whenever the brain is showing those thoughts, you know, so we got Martin Luther King. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why Martin Luther King is first. So he's first. And then we have Malcolm X here, who is the second person on this list. So I just kind of ordered them like that, you know, using that hidden ordering prefix. And that's something that you can use if you do want to specify the thought order in the brain, in whatever brain you might be building and putting together. And a lot of these here, I have tags on them that kind of show what they did. So Muhammad Ali, the boxer. We have Oprah, who's an author, and if you hover over here, TV host and philanthropist. So there are really just a lot of ways. You can also, as I mentioned with the labels earlier, you can use the labels for things like that as well. But there are really just a lot of ways to visualize, to quickly visualize information about a thought, even without activating it. And then also I made some connections here between some of them as far as Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois not really seeing eye to eye on how to approach the civil rights movement. And I believe they were on opposing, they were fighting for the same goal, but they were on opposing teams. So, or opposing, they had opposing views, I should say. So here on this link, I actually, another cool thing that not a lot of people who use the brain know that you can do, you can add notes to links as well, and you can, you know, specify a link type. So here it helps me quickly specify. I can see here, all right, their opponents, and if I want to say, you know, so actually when I put these two thoughts together quite some time ago, so when I was reviewing this brain before this presentation, I didn't know why I put them as opponents. I was like, all right, so I clicked on this, and you know, there's a perfectly good explanation for why they're opponents in there. So that can just be useful for if you have a relationship between one thought and another thought, and you link them together, but you want to specify why they're linked together. You can use a link type for that, but you know, if you have more to say than just a few words, then the link type might not be the best thing for that. You can add it in the notes here. So as far as I think that was the last thing that, oh, actually one more thing that I did want to mention here, just the notable mentions tag that I put together. So this is something that you can use in your brain. I mean, anyone who might need to present a brain or to share a brain or something like that, this is definitely something you should have, because then it's a way to sort of bookmark things in your brain or to sort of mark them as your favorite. So I added the star icon here to kind of make that clear. And every thought that has that star icon, I think we visited almost every single one of them now, was just one that I thought was a notable mention that I wanted to try to touch on in this presentation if I could. So with that, I think that is pretty much all I wanted to go through here. I will go ahead and pass it back over to Shelly for any questions that might have come up for the Black Lives Matter, regarding the Black Lives Matter brain, and we can proceed.
Wonderful.
To
yes,
later.
We do have a number of questions that have popped up. So we're going to do a midway Q&A and dive into that. And just, what I'd like to say in terms of synthesis and understanding, I love this brain. I love that it's your perspective. And I love that it takes us to places that, I wouldn't have thought of. I mean, you're mentioning significant historical events. You're right. I mean, when you put them all together, it's not, it's not great, obviously. We have a long way to go. And I love getting in there and seeing it is actually stunning, to be honest. I want to thank you for that and your candor and putting this together. We actually worked on this as a team brain, we did a few things and got it started. And Jay's like, Shelly, Matt, stay out of here. This is my brain, which like it is, obviously. So just FYI on that. And there are some questions about information architecture. So I want to move to that. But the one area also that got people's interest in that we added, the inspirational leaders, the icons, that was cool too. Just, we only put it, there's only like 40 or something, but there's so many interesting ones. And the one that most recently we added was, of course, John Lewis, who just passed away, who's in the news. So this is an example of these brains are going to grow and evolve. They're not static. It's not something you do and then you put away on your desktop or shelf. Like maybe there'll be some amazing new civil rights bill that comes out or some significant change, and Jay will be adding to the history. So this is sort of a dynamic process. And to that question, to that end of it, a lot of people had some questions, and I'm going to also cover this in my COVID-19 brain. But the question is a little bit about taxonomy. How do you create a brain that actually, in Lou's word, doesn't just become a dumping ground? So how did you get started? And this is interesting for us because I remember Jay actually wanted to start, if you go to the top of the brain, with just 2 thoughts, which for me, I'm like, what? 2 thoughts? We had a little bit of a debate about it. It was like, okay, it's Jay's brain, how to understand and how to help. So maybe you can walk us through the genesis of this brain, how it started from an information architecture perspective, and where it kind of evolved to, and also like where you'd like to go with it, future stuff that maybe you didn't have time to add.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like Shelly mentioned, I will be adding any new information that I come across in this brain. So we're gonna keep this brain going, definitely. I will also, anyone who might also have any, additions, subtractions, comments, contributions, feel free to write to us at support@thebrain.com, and we'll consider those. And if it's something that, that seems appropriate for this brain, we'll definitely include it in this brain. So, feel free to, you guys can definitely pitch into this brain as well. So as far as putting it together though, I think it just really has to do with how each individual person approaches something like this. I'm just kind of a little bit meticulous about how I start things as to not make them, as to not have it turn into a dumping ground.
Right.
My kind of way to just do that is just make sure you know where everything is. And if so I even had a thought, I think at one point, that was just called dump. And I just dumped things in there. But the thing is, that was sort of like I did that because I knew by the time it was time for this presentation, I would have organized everything on their dump, and dump would have been completely taken out of this brain.
Right. You know what? And
So
that's a valid point, because
yeah,
brain box, that's what, in a sense, brain, you know what? You need a place to dump. It's just that you don't want
right,
the entire brain to become a dump,
right,
I guess,
right,
to Lou's point. And
right,
that is an interesting point. Like, don't be afraid
exactly,
to just throw stuff in and organize it later, because there's the
exactly.
other side of it where people get a bit too fastidious in how they're doing it.
And I will say, this is also something that people don't necessarily always do in the brain. If you don't necessarily always have to have a new topic that you put in your brain, be specifically related to the old topics that you're already doing in your brain. Like you can definitely create a new section of your brain to just stand alone and start putting things in there. So such that now you don't have this one brain, which is a really significant brain, which is a really important brain that's just filled with all these things. If you want to add things to a brain that you're not sure where to put them for now, like I said, you could create a thought called dump, such that like subconsciously it's telling you you need to take care of this stuff. Because if you just added it in your brain, most likely you'll forget about it. But if you have a thought, and sometimes I'll even pin that thought as like, I need to take care of this thought. So that's just a way that I use to kind of make sure that my brain doesn't turn into, a whole thing, a whole dump that I can't pretty much figure out where things are. So I just try to keep track of things from the start and try to structure it that way.
Great. And I can cover a little bit more about information architecture when we move over to the COVID-19 brain as well. But I do like this is a different structure. I mean, it starts with just two thoughts at the top, and then you drill down deeper. Very different from something like I would have started, but I appreciate and respect the two main categories kind of, can you go back to those top categories just
Oh
so we
yeah,
can
of
look at
course,
those actually,
definitely.
just to show people,
Oh, hang
because
on.
you sort of have your top thought, your home thought, right? And then from there you typically when you start, you'll build down, and then you start to make the connection. So I think what was interesting about this brain from an information architecture perspective is you went into two different distinct areas and sort of carved a niche that way. And then from there things will interconnect, but you've segmented at the get-go. And that keeps it very clean at the top by the way, for new users. It looks fantastic. Okay, and then we actually have a lot of really specific questions for you, Jay. So I want to cover those before we move on to the other brain. One of them's coming from More Calm. He says, question for Jay. I spent over 3 decades working with a wide variety of companies to introduce some major, some massive changes to companies ranging from 80 employees to 70,000, several thousand. A key stage was to identify roadblocks, the reasons why even many are resisting desirable changes. Has Jay's model included those sorts of idea, why people are resistant to change, and how can they be given a good experience that would maybe undermine that resistance?
That's actually a great point. I don't believe that this brain has a section like that yet, but I mean, now that you actually just mentioned that, I think it's something that I'm gonna include after this meeting. But from my perspective, it's just change is not always. I mean, it just makes sense, right? Because as humans, we try to gravitate towards like comfort and what's comfortable. So, if it just for a lot of people, and for something that I've seen too, in as in like newer generation of non-African Americans, a lot of I will say for a fact, 100% of my friends aren't racist. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be friends with someone who was racist, but even
Or you
still, they
probably
just
are and you
not.
don't know it.
Right, perhaps. But even still though, they're just not, they like a lot of them don't know how to help. A lot of them don't, they're not so willing to go out and protest. They're not so willing to stand up amongst all their other white friends and speak for the truth and speak for what's right. It just comes down to that, it's kind of like working out, right? Like your body doesn't want to work out. You just have to go out and do it. Your body, as humans, you're used to comfort. So actually making a change will take a lot of effort. So, you know, if you're trying to persuade someone to make a change and they're kind of fighting against it, or they're not as receptive towards it, I would say, you know, try to be understanding that, you know, it's not necessarily that they want to just be completely blind. It's the fact that, you know, they have to put in the effort to make this change, and maybe that's not an effort they want to put in. But also you can just try to appeal from their angle, right? Try to, instead of just being like, hey, you're wrong, you should make this change, try to show them like why, try to prove to them why, you know, making that change is the right thing. And for people that you kind of approach like that, I've seen that's usually, you know, pretty useful, and that usually works.
And actually, I should point out in the Q&A, Jerry Mikulski is attending, and he actually has a thought called resistance to change in his mega brain. So when I take presenter, I'll pull that out. It was tempting to add Jerry to the session, but I thought, no, we've got like too much to cover. We might need to do a broader, you know, worldview topics and bring like a ton of people. And actually, Mark Trexler's brain has some nice stuff on global warming as well. So Matt, any other, I think there were a few more key questions for Jay that we might want to get to. I think you've been on the Q&A a little more in depth than I have, so I'll let you have a chance to ask Jay a few more things.
Yeah, I think we have gotten to most of them, but also some people want to know how to watch the progression of this brain. So everyone on today's call will receive not only just a link, so as Jay modifies and evolves this brain, you'll be able to see that online and access this brain. But also Jay has shared the BRZ, the brain archive. That's also available for download. I've posted that link a few times. You'll receive an email after the call with a recording of today's webinar, links to see Jay's brain online, as well as download your own copy. And if there's areas of where you feel you want to map out your thoughts, your experience, your ideas in a copy of this brain, you can certainly do that. And if you do have something to share with Jay, you'd like to see it in the master brain, send a note to support@thebrain.com. Just put attention Jay. We'll make sure that Jay receives that info and weaves that and incorporates that into his brain.
Yeah, and actually John Parkin had an interesting question where he wanted to see some thoughts from a Canadian perspective, right? Which is funny because of course I'm Canadian, so it's like, yeah, the movement is different in different regions, obviously, central to the US. But yes, absolutely, you can leverage what Jay has done and either copy thoughts into your brain. In fact, I loved when we were getting back to barriers of entry that you have that donation section, because I mean, of course, I'm all about COVID. Even with the masks, I'm not getting out and protesting, right? But I love that you've made it safe, and you've lowered some of these barriers to entry for maybe people like me who, you want to support, but, I have concerns from a health and safety perspective about that. That's just my personal view. So I'm actually going to start copying and play. I have an area in my COVID brain for how to protest and social change during a pandemic. So I love that I'll probably copy some of those thoughts from Black Lives Matter into this brain. So there is lots of possibilities. All right, great. So I'm going to go ahead and take presenter, and we can still circle back to Black Lives Matter, Jay, and just cover now sort of another example here that's focused on the COVID-19 pandemic brain. But before I do that, I want to actually pull up in relation to Lou's question and Jerry. This is Jerry's brain online. The link is in the Q&A, but he has a section here on resistance to change under resistance and status quo. So this particular brain has hundreds of thousands of thoughts on everything. It's another great example. We do have that linked from our blog post, and Jerry has shared the link. But this is a section, so if we want to just go into, backlash, for instance, when I click on this thought, it's going to trigger all related pieces of information. And it might be a little slower with my connection because I'm looking at the web client, but you can see that we're just getting into all kinds of stuff There's a link here to the Wikipedia, and just throughout history, backlashes from the printing press all the way to sexism scandals to all kinds of things. So you can see, I guess, as a society, as it appears in Jerry's brain, we are fairly resistant to change. But this is an interesting area that, thank you, Jerry, for sharing, that I think people will find very interesting as well. So we can tweet that out or share that further. And again, all these things come together. So turning things a bit now to another issue that, of course, is near and dear to all of our hearts and affects our lives, the COVID-19 pandemic. And Matt, I just want to confirm that you can see my screen and I'm looking okay here.
Yes, it looks great.
Oh, good, yeah.
Yeah, good. And then just from the information architecture maintenance perspective, I'll get back to that question, Lou. I love that question that you asked. This brain has evolved, and the way we started is we sort of decided to basically drive some stakes into the ground as to what are our main categories. I like to think of the main top level thoughts as sort of the Archimedean points, the knowledge hubs, if you will, to then move on. And I have changed this brain because this used to just at the top, we had something just called bending the curve, because this brain started in March when we were I guess we were a bit naive. We thought, oh, we're going to stay at home for 2 months and then we'll all pop out and things will be fine. Well, here we are into July. We've reopened part of economies, and now in Los Angeles, where the brain's based, we're now closing things again. So it's not as simple as anyone thought, and it's certainly more pervasive than everyone thought. So in this particular section, for those of you who looked at this brain, we did a wonderful session with Jerry Mikulski and Mark Trexler also presenting their brains. They have Jerry has stuff on this as well on COVID-19. And this used to be I used to have the section on bending the curve, which I can go ahead and, this whole section on masks, for instance, can just do a quick search here. Flattening the curve. This was at the top, but because obviously that's important still today, but what's more important is how to live with the new normal in a COVID-19 area. I then now developed this new section to kind of address that. And actually, where I'm starting to intersect with Jay's brain on Black Lives Matter is I was really thinking a lot about, and you can see in this area, I haven't filled it yet because I'm thinking about this, like, how do we vote safely? How do we protest safely? How do we assert our democratic rights in a COVID-19 area? So this is something that I'm working out in my brain as we speak. I love that, for instance, Jay has this area on megafunds. In fact, what I can do, if I actually want to go ahead and copy some of his thoughts, I can go ahead and do this and copy. I'll just copy all 4 of these thoughts, and I can come over here and paste these 4 thoughts into my brain. So this is just to give you an idea of how, if you download Jay's brain zip, and maybe you don't want everything in his brain, but you want to know, I really love the idea of some of these funds to contribute to. So I'm going to put this now in the COVID-19, and I've now taken some of Jay's stuff. I can actually link to, not to get to Star Trek, but of course you can also link to have one brain open another and things like that. And Matt can cover that in the Q&A if he wants to go there, or if people want to see that. But anyway, you can copy thoughts from brain. So now I've got that, and it can evolve. So maybe I want to put this under safe protests. So now I'm just adding a new thought in my brain. I have the ability to type and tag it to create any type of classification I want. In this case, I'm just going to leave it untyped, and I'm going to add it in here as it's under voting and democracy. And I'm just going to go ahead and add this brain, and then I might go ahead and put this here. Obviously, it's a little bit different from protesting, but this is my mega funds area. And the other thing that I might want to link to this is my information on masks and social distancing. So the other thing, people are asking, what's the point of having all this information? Why don't I just, keep doing my Google search? Well, the brain's going to show me things that I would have otherwise forgotten about. So I know somewhere in this brain, in March, I was, now masks, okay, it's old hat. We put our mask on. Where you live may or may not have mandates, but we do it anyway, out of respect and to obviously keep the COVID rates down. So, I've got stuff in here. So all I have to do is type in the first couple letters and, there it is. And I can discover stuff that I forgot about. So there's an interesting article actually on how to make your own face mask. So that was kind of cool. And I'm just going to go ahead and just link to this mask section. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually adding things into my brain. And then if I want to get regional about this, just to go back to John Parkin's question, I can also link to different areas. So I have a section in my brain on Los Angeles. And maybe obviously that's where there are a lot of protests. I want to look at what's going on there. So I'm going to go ahead and connect Los Angeles to whether or not their protests were safe or not. That's fine. And that takes me to a whole another area in this brain. And of course, Los Angeles is a hot spot now, our city. And I'll go to this area. This takes me to another area in our brain where we've got Florida, Louisiana, Texas. And this is all evolved because this has changed. In fact, not that Alberta, where I currently am right now, Canada's rates are great, but cases are growing, for instance, somewhat in Alberta, not at all relative to the States, but let's say that becomes a new hotspot. This is in Canada. I can add Alberta here as well. So you see how this can change, or lo and behold, if, California gets off the map, I can go ahead and I can unlink these two items here just by right clicking. So if I want to take California out of the hotspot zone, I can unlink it and change it. So there's really nothing that's too static in this brain. And I probably want to unlink this because unfortunately, California did flatten the curve when we had our lockdowns, but now that has changed. So you see, as I'm doing this, I've just done a little editing here where I've now unlinked it from sort of the flattening curve area to a hotspots. And this is also really relevant for my new section on living in the new normal, because this is a good example of, there's a great article called The Hammer and the Dance, where sometimes you'll move out of these restrictions, but sometimes, we've gone too far or we don't have it under control, we have to move back in. And that's actually what's happening now in California. So again, so this brain will reflect that. So I'm just going to go to my thought top. I'm, of course, just diving right in. And that's actually what's so great about a brain. And I hope you guys get that out of all of our brains, that if I just have a specific piece of information, I don't have to look at everything in a single brain. I can use that search and just pull up laser focus on exactly what I'm interested in, or I can go more broad and navigate. So we decided to look at some of the key areas in this brain. So a regional area, because of course, COVID is so regional, from, what's going on in, for instance, Switzerland to, of course, Canada. So there's each region here, and then each region, for instance, actually has links. So any thought can be connected to anything else. You can have a URL or content. So in this particular area, if you click on a country, so we've got Italy here. I've got the COVID-19 Bing tracker, so we can see active cases and get active statistics on this. So this brain is very much alive. I do use this quite a bit. That being said, there is information that is older. We've kept it in. We're sort of adding to it. You might want to archive or get rid of some of that stuff. And of course, the structure here is you can drill down to country, and then countries will have different topics. So for instance, and some of them are organized more than others. So for instance, in the United States, we did map out all the states. So I can go into Texas and then again, look at an article here on how Governor Abbott has, issued a mask mandate. And if I want to go ahead and add to what's going on in Texas, I can go ahead and drag and drop URLs, or I can actually go ahead and do a web search. I really do like this feature where I can just go ahead and launch Texas. Maybe I want to actually do something a little bit more specific, COVID, Texas in regards to COVID news. And I'll just kind of give you a sense of my workflow process for adding information into the brain. So there's some interesting things going on with cleanup from Hannah. So they've got some challenges in addition to, you could do a whole brain on weather and for Texas. But if I want to go ahead and look at this article and it makes sense, I can simply drag and drop the URL and add it into my brain. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in under Texas. So I'm simply dragging and dropping, and then what that does is that goes ahead and it grabs the URL. This is a live link to that news site, and I actually have my brain displayed. You can see Jay's, the default is to kind of have the content to the side. I'll go ahead and play with this a bit and actually make my brain a little bigger. I'm going to just hide the GoToMeeting module here. I've got too many things open. So you can see I can look at that content and you know, kind of in the greater context. Now there's a few areas that I really like. The new normal, I pinned that, so you guys can go ahead and reference that. The area that I'm also focused in a lot right now are treatments and vaccines. Now you can see that we've got some hot links, and I actually have to update this area because at the time it was all about certain treatments. Now the new, and that we've got, this is a YouTube video that's going to play in the content area. Now what I'm interested more in is what's going on for vaccines. So I've listed in this brain a number of vaccines, and of course the vaccine that's getting a lot of news play right now is the Moderna vaccine, mRNA vaccine. So what I've done here is I've taken this and I'm trying to kind of do some research and assimilate it. So in this particular brain, you can actually see who the company or institution that is working on that vaccine and the clinical trial phase that it's under. So this is getting more into some more formal research. We do have a lot of drug, pharmaceutical, medical researchers that use the software. One of the advantages of the brain, of course, is the ability to organize information under many different dimensions. So this particular vaccine, it's typed as a vaccine trial. I've got some information here I can click on. Actually, this was a phase one study on, you know, how they evaluated it in non-human primates. And then, of course, what exactly this type of vaccine, how it works. So this is linked from the company's website. And of course, there's other vaccines that we can reference. There's microneedles, there's intranasal stuff. There's all kinds of different research going on, you know, just to kind of keep this in the more inspirational aspect of it. So, you know, there is some progress being made. Now, this particular vaccine is put out by the National Institute of Health. That's a government organization of the United States. And from there, I have links to kind of their website and what their perspective is, and of course, an article from the San Francisco Gate. The other thing that I can see here is that it's also done in partnership with a pharmaceutical company. So you can see my thought types are company, institution. I have thought types for trials of vaccine, for clinical phases. So a thought type is really just an additional level of semantic meaning that you can add to a thought. So for instance, if Moderna decided to, I guess, become a nonprofit and, you know, they've changed the type of organization they are, I could go ahead and change them to educational institution. And you can see now that thought type has changed. And the advantage of that is I can actually do a search in this nice brain of all my educational institutions, all my pharmaceutical institutions, all the leaders of a country. So that's a typology that I'm overlaid over top of my taxonomy structure. But actually, I'm going to go ahead and right click this. I kind of want to keep this clean now that it's public. And let's go back and set this back to, you can see how easy it is to change back to pharmaceutical company. And I'm going to go to this thought just so you can get a sense of here. Again, this is just multiple perspectives. If you're looking at this from an investment perspective, you can actually have stock prices, stock quotes. Not that this brain should be used for any sort of forward-looking or investment purchases, but I do like to pat ourselves on the back and tell Harlan that we actually had Gilead Science and the drug that has been causing a stir in this brain well before it became the sensation that it was when it was, you know, yet at UCLA. So it is interesting that you can sort of build this knowledge base and make predictions on kind of what's going on in the world. So that's really just kind of a high level structure and look at our COVID-19 brain. I think we're on the hour, so I think what I want to do is probably now move into Q&A. This brain, again, is a resource. It's a public resource for everyone on our website, so feel free to use it. Also happy to, I don't know if we have the brain zip on this. I think we do, yes. So you can go, we'll have to actually re-zip it because there's been changes, but you can go ahead and change this. I guess there's one more thing I do want to show you real quick. I showed you a little bit how to add web pages and content, but the other thing I want to talk to you about is documents real quick, how easy that is as well. So let me just go back to Moderna. And, you know, again, this vaccine, there's a lot going on here, but I've got some research on it. I've got a document and evaluation on that. So I can actually go ahead and I can control click and I can copy documents, or I can drag and drop them into my brain. So in this case, I've just dragged 2 documents in. So it doesn't have to be web content. It can be documents. And if I actually want to create new content, I can go ahead and just go ahead and add content to my brain. I can click on this menu here and I can add an event. I can add an attachment. So if I want to do a new paper on this document, I can start working and adding files as well in this brain. So I don't want people to just think of the brain as a static archive. We have students, teachers, researchers, all kinds of other brains that are sort of beyond the scope of this webinar, where you're working it out. You're doing, you know, hardcore document management in the brain as well. And the other thing that's kind of cool is if I drag and drop this PDF in, let me do that. We have nice document viewing options as well. So I can kind of see this as I look at the Plex. So that's that. There was one more example brain that I kind of want to show just to give you a wide variety. And this is really what visualizing your worldview is all about, because, you know, you can go deep on everything like Jerry has in his complete worldview, or you can go laser in on, like, you know, Black Lives Matter, coronavirus, and these things all sort of come together, of course. This particular brain was done by Climate Web. We don't have time to get into it, but it is linked also as another example off our blog entry. But this is all on climate science. This is done by Dr. Mark Trexler. Just wanted to show this brain because last seminar he talked about his COVID-19 brain, but this is also an issue that's, I know, near and dear to a lot of people on our mind, climate change. So this particular brain is fabulous. This is another resource for you, and you can also ping Mark about it. But just another perspective. The thing that I do like about this brain is, I'm going to flip it around, is Mark's use of notes here, where he's really created some nice, just like Jay and Black Lives Matter, some nice notes, whereas I think myself and Jerry tend to just like linking the URLs, the information sources. So this is just another example of something that's a little bit more sculpted, where he's got his write-up here. You can go into his deep dives, where he's gone into, you know, if I want to go into what, you know, what's good for business audience. He's also got links here in the notes area. So for instance, mitigation strategies for climate change and things like that. And again, just another example of, you know, how you can, you know, map things out, and just the, you know, the amazing power of the brain. And I think with that, I'll go ahead and pass Q&A over to you. I just love this section in Jay's brain too, where you can scroll over these leaders. This is adding a thought icon, which we can also cover in our Q&A. This I also love. So plenty of stuff for you guys to look at and hopefully inspire. And I think this is sort of, we're at our hour. So Matt, if you want to hop on, and we'll pass it over
Absolutely.
to you now for Q&A, or if there's anything anyone wants to see in COVID, I can keep presenter just for a bit if there's any specific questions, but if not, I'll, you know.
No, go ahead and send it my way. I'm happy to demonstrate a couple of different things with everyone. First off, thank you everyone for being so active and participating in the question panel in the GoTo meeting. We've done our best to answer all of your questions. If we don't get to one of your questions today, please feel free to also write into support@thebrain.com. We're happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. And also, it's important to point out that every Friday we have a Brain 101 class. The class sizes are typically much smaller than these specialty webinars that we have once or twice a month. So we do get the opportunity to answer all of the questions. If you're new to the brain and you're seeing a lot of information come at you today with building brains on all of these really important topics that are going on in our lives, and you want to get started, but you're feeling a little intimidated, please feel free to join a Brain 101 and take a look step by step how to get started.
Yeah, they don't start like
brain.
this, but it is amazing how quickly you start with a basic structure and it does grow. So Matt, front and center on that class, Brain 101, every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Great class. And also for advanced users, you can hop in at the end and we can demo more of your questions. And then just in terms of format real quick, what we're going to do is go, I guess I'm in Mountain Time, but I'll stay in Pacific. So we're on the hour, 12 o'clock Pacific time. We're going to go another 15 minutes. So we want to be respectful of everyone's time, but we'll stay on the call till around 12:15, I guess. Just to answer any more questions. So Matt, I know if you have a few, and I'll hop into Q&A and read more as they come.
Absolutely. So a few questions that I saw come in. First were regarding bringing content into the brain, documents and documents, web pages. Each individual thought will always have its own note, and you can copy and paste content into the notes. You can certainly just click in the notes area and start typing your information that you want from scratch. But you also saw a lot of drag and drop. Shelley was dragging and dropping web pages into the brain. We had a lot of web content, a lot of videos that you drag and drop that YouTube, and it just starts playing right there in the brain.
And by the way, in Black Lives Matter, Martin Luther King section, we've got a lot of the YouTubes. And I don't know if Jay, if there's any other like that section on African American leadership. Awesome. I highly recommend going in there, just like watching some of those videos. And then in the context
and
of
it's
everything
really
else,
a powerful way to bring,
great.
to bring all those, different information sources, videos, along with, history and text and documents and links to important web pages. So it's really a great way to bring all of that information together. I wanted to share with you another option that you have for building brain, since this came up a couple of times in the question panel, talking a little bit about BrainBox, like, I've got all this information and I want to get it into the brain, and then sit back and take your time and look at it and say, okay, here's all my data, where is it going to go? And the BrainBox is a really, really great way to quickly capture all of that information and data that's coming at you from all directions. And then when you've got a little bit more time, some breathing space, sit back and start developing that information and weaving it into the network of your brain. And so what I'm going to do really quickly is I've got just a web page open here on my other browser.
And by the way, BrainBox is particularly useful for mobile access. So I built a lot of my brains on the go. So when I'm on my phone, Google News, I just hit forward to BrainBox, and then it's in my BrainBox when I'm on my desktop, or just in my brain on my phone. So for mobile use, it's particularly great.
Absolutely. And let me just make sure. Now, you can get to your brains online. So I am going to go to thebrain.com. And going to log in really quickly. It's really great to, when you're using BrainBox, if not logged in yet, if to prompt you to log in when you add something into your BrainBox, because the way BrainBox works is you're sending some data into your brain account. So the brain needs to know who I'm sending this data into. So let's say I'm logged into the brain on my website. This is all the brains that I have available to me online, so I can view those online. But I don't have, maybe I'm just going to even minimize this. I'll leave it open just to save time, but maybe I don't have the brain application open right now. Or if I do, I'm in a different brain that I'm building, completely different area. But I stumble across a thought. Now, it was interesting that Shelley went into the Texas area, My parents live in Texas, and I'm
Oh,
in
wow.
constant communication with them about what's going on and making sure that they're staying safe. And it's an area of particular interest to me. So what do I want to do? I want to be able to find these resources quickly to share them with my parents whenever I'm browsing around in the COVID brain. And here is a great place for free COVID testing that's happening in the Houston area. Great. I want to make sure to share this URL with my dad the next time I've got him on the phone, or maybe even find the specific location for him and give him directions, whatever the case may be. Again, I don't have that brain open. I stumbled across this info. It's really, really important to me. I'm simply going to click on the brain box icon and add this information into my brain box so that I can organize it at a later date. And here's another random web page. Once again, more information about Texas going back to school. So some valid information. I've got a lot of family in Texas, and some of them are kids. So
And I do
I'm going
have
to
a
add
section
this in
on
as well.
school and the new normal too, which we
So
can
I
put
can
in.
add this into multiple
Yeah.
locations into my brain so we can see how those cross references start working. Great, I've added that into my brain. I've moved on to other projects, and now I'm able to get to work in my brain, and I recall, oh, I've added some additional information. Now, I could add that here from the desktop or from my phone as well. I'll share both with you really quickly. So here I've got my brain open, and now I've had the time to, I'm gonna go to the US area, and I'll just scroll right over to Texas really quickly.
And by the way, for those
And
of
go
you
to
that
the
are
Texas.
using this brain, you can delete all the other states and make your brain about California or Texas. So that's the other thing. And we had to
Absolutely.
do the regional section for COVID because it is so regionalized. But if you find that you don't want all the stuff, you can fine tune it as well. So you can also, it can be subtractive as well as additive, I guess.
Absolutely. This is another brain that you can download and make it your own. Add your own views, opinions, content, information that's important to you. Now, I share this brain with Shelly. Shelly mentioned very briefly earlier that we contribute very, very minimally into the Black Lives Matter brain. With Jay. This COVID brain was started, I believe, by Shelly. She shared it with the rest of the team at TheBrain Technologies, and we all collaborated and added information. I'll share more on that with you in a bit. That's done through TeamBrain. Having a TeamBrain license allows multiple people to collaborate with the same brain. So you can see already the cleanup from Hannah's pyramid COVID-19 surge. That information that Shelly added during our demo today, my brain is set to auto sync. That information has already arrived for me in my brain. So it's a great way to collaborate through the brain as well, especially now that we're all working from home. Shelly didn't need to pick up the phone and call. I can just see that she's adding information into this area of the brain as well.
Oh yeah, if you want to go to the little reports area, you can kind of show.
Absolutely, I'll absolutely that up. Let me bring my two thoughts in really quickly. I'm going to click on BrainBox. I like to get there this way. There's a little BrainBox icon in the upper right-hand corner. Every thought also has an attachments tab, a little plus tab, where I can add a file type of, a new Excel spreadsheet or PowerPoint document or what have you. And I can add something in from BrainBox right here in the attachments tab as well. I like to click on the icon up above, and sorry, I won't be interrupted by that. I like to click on the icon up above, and there you can see already the two thoughts that I call everything a thought, the two web pages that I just recently sent into my BrainBox. They're already there and waiting for me. So I've got all kinds of recipes and other interesting things that I throw into BrainBox from time to time. There they are. Now I'm in the right place. This is exactly where I want to add my new thought for free COVID-19 testing in the Houston area. I've got options to preview. I can attach this to the current active thought, or with the plus sign, I can create a new child thought, and that thought has been added there. It's found a home, a location in my brain. From here, I can add to other things. I'll do this with the other thought or the other web page that I added for Go Back to School in Texas in just a moment. There you can see I've added added it into my brain. My brain is already auto syncing, so Shelly will have access to this information as well. Now, before I jump onto my phone to give you a brief demonstration there, I'll share with you, Shelly mentioned, reviewing all of the content that each of our team members at TheBrain have added. And here you can see I just added the most recent thing. It's the COVID-19 testing for the city of Houston. Here's Shelly's information that she's recently added. If I want to view, this is, and this is, there you can see the icon or your gravatar. If you've got a gravatar, TheBrain uses gravatar to add those images. And if I want to go way back and say, all right, in the past, 3 months, 6 months, what have you, what's been added into the brain, who's been contributing in a team brain environment. So here I'm stretching it all the way out to 180 days. And there's been a lot of activity in this particular brain. So you can see these numbers jump up very quickly. So 4,587 changes in 180 days. And I can even filter that further. What has Peter been contributing into this brain, or what did Jared or Harlan add to the brain? So I can review other users' contributions. And every thought, really quickly, I'll share this with you. If you click on the active thought, you'll open up the thought properties display. You can also alt-click on any thought in the brain and review the history for that thought. So I can see specifically who added content, when it was added, and specifically, what the link was or what was changed and when that took place. So there's accountability for every thought in the brain as well. And that's a great, great feature of Team Brain. But before I end this and take the next question, if we still have time, I've got a little app here where I can share my screen on my iPhone. So you're about to see everything that, here I'm holding my iPhone, but you're about to see everything that I see. There's my login screen. So I'm just gonna log in really quickly, and I am going to open TheBrain. Now the brain will always take me to my, oh, there you go. It took me to my last activated thought, was Texas, which is Texas. Notice it's inking down below. So all these new changes we just added are slowly coming in.
I'll show you mine.
Content. Yeah,
I love
we'll
using
show
my
up.
brain for mobile access.
It's absolutely a fantastic. I'm clicking here on the phone if you see me on the camera, but it's everything that I click on the, if I want to review what's happening in Canada or the US is being displayed there on the screen.
Let's go to Black Lives Matter, Matt, if you can. Or I don't know if that's going to mess up the simulator.
I'm not sure if I've downloaded that one locally yet.
There we go. There it is. That's fine. But there, I love your graphics, Jay, by the way, the thumbnail for that too. That was nice. And actually somebody had commented when they saw your beginning, all your different thumbnails in your brains. There was a question on how to do that as well.
Oh, great, great. I'll get to that really quickly then, but I just want to share with you
You're on mute,
that
Jay.
even from the from your phone, you can add new thoughts, new content. I can review notes. US has notes associated with it. These are links to the individual state. So if I want to see what's happening in Missouri or Montana, I can go directly to that state from the note. And of course, there is my brain box. So here's the Texas thought. If I go back to Texas, I'll just do a search for Texas and go directly to that thought, and then go to my brain box and add as a child thought from my brain box. I'm doing this on my phone now, and I go back into the brain and I can see that Texas AG local schools, all that information about that thought, and the link down below so I can launch that web attachment.
Yeah, I find BrainBox mostly interested for mobile creation. That's where I use it the most. When I'm on my desktop, I'm more like the drag and drop maven, but on the phone, BrainBox is great. All right, cool. Well,
absolutely.
Now we might shift things a little bit back to Black Lives Matter. There are a couple more questions. Earlier on, Chip had asked if this brain could be used for, more work in the community. So, we did publish this brain and it is available, and, we're happy, I guess Jay's happy to share. And then Jocelyn had a question about if Jay's interested in, or more of a comment, interested in Black Lives Matter poetry, we published a few poems in our June anthology, and there's more coming in August. So I thought that was interesting too. Some people have some ideas for how to grow the Black Lives Matter brain. And then John had a question about the brain box. Getting back to Matt's demo, where do all of your brains feed off the same brain box, or is there one for each? And to answer it real quickly, yes, one brain box for everything. So you can quick shift to different brains. And maybe now that you're in your desktop map, you could kind of show the brain area where how you open different brains. Like on your desktop, you've got your Black Lives Matter, your COVID. I know you've got your Laura Bloom brain. So
yeah.
Sometimes you want the all-in-one brain that encompasses everything, but you can also go the more content-specific group where you have many different brains on different topics as well.
That's absolutely right. And there's a couple of different schools of thoughts. One massive brain, smaller topic-specific brains. It's a more advanced feature, but you can merge brains together or take one brain and segment it apart into smaller topic-specific brains. So once again, don't let that be a stumbling block for you when you're just getting started with the brain. Go ahead, put everything all in one brain, and if you decide, oh, I want this to be a unique brain that I can share with a particular team or a set of colleagues, you can actually do that at a later date, segment that smaller brain out. This is a list of all of my available brains. At the very top of the brain application, you can see it's a tabbed interface, and you can click on the plus tab to open up your brain list and navigate to any specific brain on any specific topic that you have access to. And yes, the beauty of BrainBox is that here, I'll go into my personal brain. This is the brain where I keep hobbies, interests. I'm a coach on my kids' mountain biking team, so this is all the information that I need to know, coaching checklists, the schedule of events, and all of the coaching documents if I need to review the rule book or open up my certificates or what have you. So all of that in one little area of my brain. And anytime you open one of your brain tabs, you'll go to your most recently activated thought in that brain. So I was looking up something for my kids' mountain biking team, thus it took me to this area of my personal one I tab. So I'm gonna click on the plus tab again, go back to my brain list. And as Shelley mentioned earlier, you can customize the thumbnail that shows up for your brain. Now, if you don't select anything, it's just gonna display the name of the brain and the wallpaper that you've selected. And there were some questions about wallpaper and customizations, which we'll take a look at as well. But if you'd like, this is a sample brain, this Matt Caton brain. This is a sample brain that I created for the Brain 101. But each brain has a couple of little icons in the lower right-hand corner.
And actually, Matt, that is a good segue just into Fred's question. What are some of the main features and the difference between like the brain on the desktop and he's calling it cloud brain, the brain in the cloud?
Yes. Here I can see if it's got these little radio waves, that's telling me that I've got a local copy and it's syncing to the cloud. So all the brains at the top of the list, I'm viewing in a display of the most recently activated brains. So if I scroll down a brain that I haven't opened for a while, there you start seeing some cloud icons. These are brains that are available on the cloud that I have not downloaded. And another variation of that, I'm not sure if I have one because I sync, there's one, an older brain that I started creating, but it's got a little picture of a computer. That means it's only local. I have not synced that particular brain to the cloud. So there's a little identifier there to tell you if it's local, online, or both syncing. And I can click on the little context menu, the hamburger button, 3 horizontal lines, and I can open that brain or open in a new tab, etc. And to answer Shelley's earlier question, I can actually apply a thumbnail to, or an icon, set brain icon. So if I go out and find some wallpaper that I really like, and so I go into my C drive and I've got a wallpaper area.
And this is great for business users, team brain users, where you have a lot of different brains, maybe on different departments, categories. If you set the thumbnail to something, just gives that extra visual for users.
Yeah, and
orient on.
you could see on Jay's demo earlier, he had a just great example of that, how you can set a brain to sort of capture the sort of the feel of that particular brain or the subject matter of that brain. So there I've added just a nice little forest there. If you've got the capabilities, you can add text on top of your image and save that as a thumbnail for that brain. You don't need to have text. It could just be a graphic that appears there. So that's how we customize there in the on the thumbnail for the brain. You can customize the brain itself, the wallpaper or the color coding. Someone picked up that Shelley had set up not only a really great wallpaper here for the COVID-19 brain, but if I go to the notes for a thought, the notes are in tune with the theme of this particular brain with the wallpaper. And that's done on this little icon here, the notes style. So I can click on notes style and I can specify if I want a dark background, light background, what color the text should be, and the difference between the actual page and then the background of the note. So if I say the page is sort of this dark blue, but the background gray.
Where's he going with this?
There we go. So I'm just changing the background a little bit.
Okay.
There we go.
Put it back. No. Great.
Put it back. I'll do that. Okay, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, and in relation to customization, I don't know if we want to close on this or throw the ball back to you, Jay, for one final question. First of all, Robert, there's been a lot of congrats on a very quote from Robert. Congrats to Jay. Very nicely designed brain, very well presented. There was a final question on how to get the zoomable icons. You had some interesting pictures of like Martin Luther King, Barack Obama. So how to add a thought icon. I don't know if one of you want to take that real quick.
Sure. Well, since I've got
Matt,
the brain open, right? Yeah. Sure. It's a really, really simple process to do that. If I click on a thought, once again, that opens up the thought properties display. You can also alt click on a thought to open up thought properties. And there's always going to be a little square here to the left. If I click there, now this particular thought is inheriting its thought type, so it has the American flag. I can select from one of the brain's stock icons. We've got over 2,000 images. So if I find an image that we like, it should be a star. So I'm going to search. It's taking me to my most recent search. I did a search for the word can. Texas is the Lone Star State, so I'll type in star and select a image. There we go, from our icon library. So just take a second. There it is, and it's a little bit of a zoomable icon. But if you actually want a picture of the state of Texas, or maybe you want a picture of the governor of Texas.
Yeah, I think that's what the question was referring to, an actual photo, because we had the photographs of the leaders.
A lot of those I pretty much just clipped, did like a screenshot of
copy
that
and then paste as icon. Yes, yeah,
right.
Exactly. So we've got that for Bill Gates and some of the world leaders there that you can see. So that's just a copy and paste as icon.
So if I've got that's right. If I have a copy of Bill here on my clipboard, I could right click and then I'll have the option. It's not showing up now because it's not on my clipboard. Paste icon, yeah. Or
you could do it of a new Greg Abbott or the governor, the Jay of Oregon. There's different.
Sure, I'll governor of Washington. So I'll just copy Jay's name.
Yeah.
And I'm going to watch this. I'm going to click on F2 and oops, that opens up a new window. Here, I'll do it this way. Options. And I will F4, search web. So I'm going to search web right from the brain. I'll search a picture of Jay, is it pronounced Inslee? So this searches the web for me. And I show up with a picture of Jay Inslee. And if I just want to use this little image right here, I'm going to leave that open in the background. And this is way to grab images of the web. I'll click to open up the thought, all of the modification options, and I am going to capture an image. So the brain minimizes, and I can click and drag And there I have a picture of Jay. That'll show up in a moment. There it is. And that'll be a zoomable icon for as large as that image is. I've selected a pretty small image there, but as you can, that's another way of carrying in that you don't have. Just use the screen capture tool that's built right there into the brain as well.
All right, great. And I think with that, we're at 30 minutes overtime. So we've covered a lot of ground. So I think we're going to end the session here. But as we mentioned, we offer free support to all brain users. You can chat now on our website to any one of our support agents, and then do join us this Friday for the Brain 101, and Matt can dive into anything, or we can even invite Jay to go into his Black Lives Matter. I mean, there's lots of possibilities to cover, so feel free to join us for that session. And then before we close the session, Jay, I want to give you sort of the final word in terms of, you kind of looked at the Q&A, sort of what people were asking. Any final words of wisdom on Black Lives Matter brain, information architecture in general, and how would you recommend for these users to sort of start, crafting their own brain to represent their worldview?
Yeah, definitely. So pretty much, I would just say, kind of like how I started here, same thing as like not just dumping thoughts into your brain, kind of just structurally. I think what you want to do first is just sort of make a game plan as to what you want to accomplish with that brain. And then from there, because that's kind of how I approach this. I do have some brains that I just pretty much dump things into as well. And those I would never, I would never show to anyone. But for this one here, I started with a game plan and I kind of just followed it, and, kind of separating the brain into two main topics like this, really helps to stay within that structure and not kind of get carried away. But yeah, for anyone who is trying to sort of put together a brain that's in a similar way, I would say, pretty much pay attention to things like color code in your brain, such that it's easier to quickly identify thoughts and things like that by their color. Using thought types and thought tags. Right. I didn't mention a lot of the tags, but I did use a lot of tags. I love the colors
too. They're very powerful, strong colors. Behind the protesters in the background. It's a very the visualization of the content and then the visuals make it a very powerful user experience. I really appreciate that in terms of that, the aesthetic of this brain. I quite enjoyed that.
Right. So, and that's part of what I was going for as well. I want whoever's looking at it to kind of just see all those colors, and I didn't want it to be just black and white, because that's how I started it at first. But adding these colors definitely was a game changer, and as far as like visualization. But yeah, just using thought tags and thought types as well to kind of further categorize things. Like I mentioned, the notable mentions tag to further categorize what I need to sort of stay on the presentation. Those are just the tips that I would give, for anyone who's trying to look into this, and for anyone who does want to help this cause and are curious on how to begin. Kind of like I said, if you're looking at this brain here as sort of like a guide as to information to use, definitely be sure to start in the how to understand section first, before you kind of move on to how to help, because that's kind of important for you to fully understand why you're helping. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that would be it for that brain here.
Excellent.
And also, Matt, I would just add, I would love to see any contributions from anyone who would want to add more to this brain. So please, guys, definitely send us emails to support@thebrain.com, and I will reveal those.
Right, and we can kind of revisit this too, just like we have with the COVID-19 brain. These things are ongoing. We can always come back to it and do a follow-up session. And Matt, I know you've been kind of on the Q&A very in depth. We do need to close the session, but I just want to make sure, is there anything else that you want to say or cover before we end our session today?
I think that we covered most of the questions today. Again, we're always available, support@thebrain.com. Feedback for Jay, for myself, for Shelly, we can all receive that through that email address as well. And feel free to join us for any Friday's Brain 101 call. Happy to have you join us and really take our time with additional questions that you may have.
All right, well, with that, we're going to close today's session. Special thanks to Jay and for all the amazing questions and for all of you sticking with us beyond the hour. I think it was a very productive session and certainly very inspirational. So I hope this has helped all of you to go forth and sculpt your own worldview and put it out there to change your life and the world for the better. So thanks to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And we hope to see you on future Brain Technologies web events.